These are all the same. We got 7. Okay.
Started the record.
We got 5. Let's go. We got everybody. Yep. Call to order a work session for public art, the Public Art Initiative. Tonight, we have a few of public speakers who want to make public comment, and we will hear from Beth Wisman on where we're at on Public Art Initiative. So let's go right to public comment, and the first commenter is Hannah Johnson. Few quick rules, just please state your name for the record and keep the comments to 3 minutes, and we're good.
My name is Hannah Johnson. I am Executive Director of the Illinois Art Station here in Normal. As a representative of an organization that has quickly and quite organically established a reputation for public art and public engagement in the artistic process, I first want to affirm the Town Council for its allocation of significant funding specific to public art in this fiscal year's budget. There is much that can be achieved at a grassroots level, particularly when eager and determined artists and art enthusiasts are involved. But the capital support of one's municipality lends legitimacy, logistical practicality, and the sense of a kindred and common understanding that makes ideas more tangible and inspirations into realities. I personally am enthusiastic about the proposed public art projects that you'll soon hear about for the town of Normal, and look forward to seeing these works of art and heart come to fruition through the collaboration of working artists, educators, arts patrons, students, arts administration professionals, town of Normal staff, and members of the larger community. Building off this strong foundation, I would encourage our elected officials to have the vision necessary to see the need beyond these initial efforts as it relates to sustaining a rich and vibrant public arts program that prioritizes access, representation, preservation, and maintenance, education and interpretation, placemaking, and community building. Let's make the most of what we've got and plan for what is yet to come. Thank you.
Next speaker is Doug Johnson.
No relation. So I'm Doug Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of the McLean County Arts Center, which is the designated arts agency for both the town of Normal, city of Bloomington, and county of McLean. We are also the organizers of the Sugar Creek Arts Festival, and we present 16 exhibitions, more than 130 classes, as well as the Sugar Creek Festival, which has been rated as one of the top 100 arts festivals in the country. And in large part, that's due to the support we've received from the town of Normal. So thank you for that. This investment in public art is really an investment in the community. It pays dividends over the long run. It attracts businesses to our community and has a big economic impact. For example, my agency has a budget of around $400,000 on an annual basis. But our impact, according to the economic impact calculator from the Americans for the Arts, is actually $933,960 into the community, and for local government revenue, just over $42,000. When we consider the tax base that's generated from these sorts of events, the advantage of having a active public arts program is once it's in place, it presents a very powerful passive program. It provides an audience, it attracts an audience for public art, and announces Bloomington Normal as being a creative community. Now, the economist Richard Florida said about 20 years ago that Bloomington Normal is in the top 1% for creative communities that attract college-educated people to stay in the community and provide fuel. The McLean County Art Center has always served as a refueling station for that creative class of workers. And an investment in public art does so as well. It allows people to know who we are and that we support creativity and the creative workforce. So I appreciate your support and look forward to continued discussions. So thank you for your time.
Next speaker, Sarah Smelser.
Hello. My name is Sarah Smelser, and I'm the Harold Boyd Endowed Professor in the Won-Suk Kim School of Art in Illinois State. I'd first like to second Doug's comments, although I'm not sure I can say them as eloquently as he did. I would like to thank you all for the funding that's already in place. It's really important, and it allows us to dream a little bit and to look with seriousness. I'm really excited about the projects that you'll see in the presentation that Beth has made and will give to you shortly. And I'm particularly excited to see the changes that continue in Normal. I moved here 21 years ago, and I was walking around the other day trying to figure out what was the same. The post office was here and the Normal Theater. But it has changed so dramatically for the better, and I'm always so pleased to see this town butt up right against the university and show award-winning traffic circle, which I thought I was really funny. It was really funny at the beginning, but yes, it's gorgeous. And one thing that I selfishly appreciate about the upcoming adventures we'll have in public art is that when I have students come looking at our graduate program or come looking at our undergraduate program, I can show them, yes, we're in a creative arts community. You know, you can see it when you walk off campus onto the streets of Normal. And there are so many places that cannot claim that. So I'd like to thank you very much, and just also I guess reiterate my excitement about the underpass and what's on either end of it. It's just going to be so wonderful. Thank you.
Next speaker is Rika Shukla. Did I get that right? Anywhere close? No. So I will endure a correction of that, please.
My name is Richa Shukla, and I'm a senior at University High School. I'm on this Cultural Arts Committee, and I'm here to thank you for all the funding that you put into public art within Normal. And as someone who has lived in Bloomington for like most of my life, I think, more than a decade, I know that one thing when I say to like my friends who don't live in Bloomington, I show them the photos online, or Bloomington Normal, I show them the photos online, and they say like, wow, your community, like some of my friends live in like bigger cities and they don't have anything close to like the amazing public art we have, amazing facilities, and how like picturesque Normal looks, especially that one like aerial shot of the circle and the rest of Uptown Normal. It's especially great. And yeah, I just want to thank you all for the funding you provide, and hope you provide more in the future.
And our last speaker is, I'm going to say Shioka, is that correct? No. And I'm not even going to try your last name because you ran out of room to write and I can't read the last four letters. So I will be corrected in a moment.
Hello, my name is Shloka Ravinuthla. I am a senior at Normal Community High School, and I am part of this public art initiative. I think 2 years ago, or a little less than 2 years ago, I presented in front of you about the Multicultural Art Center, which is why I'm involved with this today. And as Rich has said, I also have spent a lot of my time in Bloomington Normal, surrounded. I used to come to the Uptown Circle a lot when I was little and like play in the water and just little things like that. So as I see like the younger generation growing up, there's a lot of course we have a wonderful city, but there's always things to improve. And adding these things that Beth is just about to introduce will benefit our town as a whole and make our community even better, and allow it to grow and flourish, attracting tourists, attracting people to move here, and all those things like that. So I just want to thank you for adding the budget to this, and yeah, just be excited to see all that Beth has to offer today. Thank you.
That concludes our public comment. We'll go right into that. But Pam, do you have any introductory comments that you'd like to make?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We're just going to use the next 45-ish minutes to talk to you about where we're at with the Public Art Initiative. And I say we, but it's not me. It's Beth Wisman and her team and the committee here. And Beth has a great presentation just to bring you up to speed on where we're at and where we're headed. So we'll be happy to answer any questions as we go along. And thank you, Beth, for leading this initiative.
Sure. So we talked about this in January of 2022. We've talked again most recently when Ryan Otto came and talked about what our lighting options might be as we're thinking about public art within the underpass project here in Uptown Normal. So this is the next update. We've been doing a lot of work since we last spoke, including really paying attention to who is getting engaged with public art and who would be interested in giving their time and energy to be a part of this process in a very meaningful and authentic way. So I will walk you through a few things. Up to date, the peer communities we talked about with you in January of 2022, we continue to talk to those communities and more, getting best practices, lessons learned, things that they have experienced in investing in public art and figuring out what works for their community. And in each of these communities, they have something similar, and they have a lot of things that are different in how they've approached these things. But the more organic and authentic, and as much as we can get public input on, it's pretty vital, regardless of where you live, you want your art to represent your community. We did, in May of this past summer, do a public art survey. We'll share some of those outcomes for the first time tonight with you. This was a scientific survey, so thanks to our communications department for helping us do that. We really wanted, again, to have real answers from our community about what, not only what they think of public art, but what do they want to see, what are they interested in, and where might they want to see it. We have also written a federal grant. I would compliment Sammy Kern, who's our development director in the Cultural Arts Department. She and I worked together along with Doug Johnson at the McLean County Arts Center to write our department's first federal grant for an NEA. We'll know come November. We'll have a little bit more on that coming up, but grants are what they are. It's an application requesting funds, and we'll go into more details about that. And then, of course, we have coordinated a 20-member group coming from the public as well as a few members of staff to begin the process of how we're going to do this. Just a reminder, a few of the communities that we talked to specifically about sculpture, which you'll be hearing about, is Urbana and Decatur. They both have very successful programs. I throw in there Peoria, obviously major metropolitan areas. I have personally been visiting and just taking every advantage I can to look at public art. But also Springfield has a mural program that is very engaged, and they actually are very invested in a big project right now that's been helpful as they're looking at some of their procurement policies and how they're doing some things. So thank you to Springfield, because they've been very, very helpful. Public input survey, we had 443 people representative. That is a scientific representation of our community, but we also collectively overall had over 1,000 responses, which the comms team tells me is very healthy. It's one of our better public surveys, so we're very excited about that. And we will continue to use tools like this, including this website that we're referencing, the Normal Forum, to keep people up to date on where we are and to give people opportunities for input. So overall, almost 90% of the people who had responded gave us very positive feedback on just supporting public art in Normal. And specifically, we asked them questions to break down where their interest levels are. So 42% of people said that creating attractive community spaces is a main benefit. 40% said that they like the idea of promoting art and local artists. It is part of our local economy after all. 40% specifically, again, we wanted to ask what tastes, we just wanted to get a sense of what the community is interested in. So we got very specific, and colorful and whimsical public art became something that people were telling us they're interested in. Doesn't mean that that's the only thing we're going to do, but it might give us some direction in our early projects. Half of the people want to see interactive public art, paintings and sculptures around Normal that would be interactive. So you could define that the way you will. We didn't get really specific in that way, but maybe a artistic bench is an interactive piece of art. Maybe a water piece that people are actually engaging with the water. Maybe we're helping create it together as a collaborative piece. So interactive art can have a lot of meanings, but we're really excited to also see that half the people who responded want to see more performing arts. As you know, you already support performing arts through our Make Music Normal and our Circle concerts at the County League Amphitheater. Just at Sugar Creek Arts Festival, Sweet Corn Circus. We are doing a lot of performing arts already. So knowing that people are interested in learning more about performing arts in Normal and supporting more of that is just affirmation that we're doing a good job. So thank you for that. Where do we find ourselves in public spaces where we think maybe art would be interesting? 46% said they are in Uptown Normal at least once a week. Almost 80% are in the Normal parks every few months, and specifically Anderson and Fairview were cited as the most popular parks. Sometimes you can use that information to help you decide if you want a contemplative, quiet space. Maybe that's not one of the places that we put art. So we're thinking, with data on how we want to make these selections. And then, of course, concrete walls along Constitution Trail, areas in existing parks. These are obviously going to be very popular spaces for public art. Again, I mentioned the NEA grant. So we wrote this grant. It is a matching grant, so it's a one-for-one match. $100,000 would go, we have to match that to be able to do the project, and I'll walk you through the details in a moment. But this is a really big project. It is attached to a well-funded public transportation project. We think we have a good shot at it. It's not making promises because there is certainly another group that will make that final decision. But every congressional district is guaranteed some amount of public art funding every year. So we're taking our shot. We'll see. Okay, so the group that we brought together comprised of, and many of them are here tonight. If you want to just wave your hand for people who are, there you are. We want this diverse group of people who have come together telling us that they are very interested in art to be able to help us make decisions based on consensus. We've talked a lot about that requiring relationship building, collaboration, community, all the things that public art should be doing. We're going to start at the centerpiece of this group and work out into the larger community so that we can learn from each other and get through challenges. That's one of the things that art helps us deal with, are challenges and thinking about how we see ourselves and where we see ourselves going. And then we will, as a staff, take the recommendations from this group to be able to move forward. And of course, you as council and mayor will see what we're doing and we'll be able to see as we're procuring pieces and coming forward to you to present what our plans are. You'll be very involved in that. But this group would be making that recommendation, and staff would be using our established protocols to move forward to do any of the work that we're doing associated with this. So very transparent. Two projects that we consider pilot projects that will help us have a proof of concept. How's this going to work? How are we engaging? How does the public feel about this? And what is the pace that we want to set? Pilot projects are great for that. So two spaces. One is at One Normal Plaza. We have worked with Parks and Recreation to think about using that data. Maybe the busier parks isn't exactly where we want to go first for an art piece. Maybe we want to go into a quieter space that is differently visited because of how people use sculpture gardens. Very often it is more of that quiet experience. So One Normal Plaza is busy sometimes, but not all the time. And so we identified with Parks and Rec a green space that has a very clear definition right outside of the Community Activity Center. We'll show you some more about that in a little bit, but that will give us an opportunity to try our hand at sculpture. and see how we do. And then, of course, the underpass project that you and I talked about not that many months ago when Mr. Otto was talking about the plans for lighting in the underpass. Because if you're going to light something, you want to know that it's going to be beautiful, and we're going to do that. So it should be a familiar piece of art. This is actually a memorial piece that is for the Illinois Soldiers and Sailors Children's School, the Circle of Friendship. That is actually the centerpiece of the space we're talking about for the sculpture garden. That piece will remain in place. It will be the centerpiece of a larger plan. We do plan to potentially have like 8 to 10 sculpture pieces in that space, but before we do that, we're going to do a master plan. So we're following the best practices that the town uses to have a plan before we start doing any work. That way Parks and Recreation will have a master plan on their books so that we can be thinking about things like parking and transportation and lighting and landscaping and all the things that will be managed once the sculpture is in place. If you've ever been to a place that's not managed well when you're looking at art, it takes a lot away from that experience. So we want to make sure we're being realistic and we know what the budget impact will be and what we need to be thinking about for a master plan. So that is actually already in the works. That should be started up in the next few months. The process overview, we will do this master plan, and then we'll actually put a request for qualifications. That'll be a public process where sculptors will be able to respond and show us their qualifications. Usually it's their portfolio, it's some amount of the work of art. Have they done public commissions before? Have they done outdoor pieces before? That type of stuff. And then this group will work together to decide, what do we want to lease? What do we want to buy? What do we want to commission and why? And so this body will come together and figure some of those things out, and then we'll actually go through the process of procuring them. And then the mural project, we anticipate a $205,000 budget. We worked with McLean County Art Center to really get some good models of what a professional, high-quality muralist would cost, along with materials. This is a major investment right at the center of our business district and our cultural district. So we want to make sure that it represents the best of what we can do. And there are a lot of muralists out there who have proven that placemaking and collaborative approaches to public art can completely change a space and redefine how people even view it. And in a perfect world, I could even imagine like this being a space where people don't even think about it being an underpass. It's not even how they reference it anymore because it becomes something bigger than what it was originally designed for. And art has that power, and it's happened all over the country, all over the world. So I wanted to point out specifically, when we wrote this grant, it's really important for us to consider that art is work and that the people who are doing it, the best of the best, and the people who are just learning to do it, it's real work, it's real time, it's real materials. And there's a history in public art of artists not having good experiences in that realm, not being properly compensated, not understanding the ins and outs of public art. And so we have been doing our homework to make sure that we're doing that. And there are a lot of resources that we've been taking advantage of in Illinois that have helped us do that. So covering, in this grant, staff time, so my time, Doug Damery in Public Works, the legal department, because we're going to have to do, obviously, contract work and things like that. When we wrote our grant, we considered that time in there as well. So we'll actually be recouping, if we get the grant, some of our money that we're putting into this, which is, I think, appropriate. The artist time and materials, education and outreach is really going to be important. So a mural project will give us a lot of opportunity to do public engagement and community building. How do we do that? Through our community partners. So we wrote in some money for outreach into the schools, into the larger community, to give people a chance to ask questions and maybe even participate in the actual process of creating art. I love this. This is something that we want to make sure that a local artist, regardless of final selection, because there's no guarantee of who the committee will choose, but there will be a local artist that will be part of the project in a local stipend, so that if perhaps they don't have the experience that would put them at the same level as the final committee selection is, they'll be able to work as an apprentice on the project, learn about painting murals, learn about the polytab material that we want to use that's very important for this project. Sometimes if you don't have the chance to do that kind of work, you never can build your portfolio and you can never build your experience to get that opportunity. So a local artist will be paid a stipend to be able to be an apprentice on that project. And then to pay for 3 original submissions. So this is a traditional model of making a selection. Essentially, we put into this grant enough money that if we have 2 to 3 finalists that the committee likes, they are actually going to pay an artist for an original concept. So we're not borrowing designs from another community. We're not someone's leftovers. We're going to have an original concept that is made just for us, and then the committee will choose from those. And so it's appropriate to pay an artist for their time to be able to do that, and if you pay for it, you'll get a much better concept. So we're really excited about it. That's where the grant dollars can really beef up this project, so we're not having to cut any corners or possibly see a lesser quality experience. We'll know by November if we get that grant, and then we could receive the funds as early as September of 2024, which means part of our process is we're going to use Polytab as almost like a parachute canvas. This is a process that McLean County Arts Center had recommended when we first sat down a long time ago to talk about the possibility. It allows for the mural to be painted off-site, which means we can be working on this whole process while we're waiting for the Uptown project to be completed. And so when it's completed sometime in early 2025, that piece will be ready to go. And as soon as it's warm enough, because it has to be a certain temperature, we'll be able to have the artists come and actually work with them to apply the mural to the space within the underpass. And we actually wrote into the grant 2 to 3 visits for the artists to come in, not only to do the work and get to know the community, but also to do some more outreach opportunities with maybe local art students who want to meet a professional artist and learn more about it. So that is best case scenario, and we're really excited about it. Of course, we can do it without the grant. We wrote a budget that could be done within the current confines of what you all have budgeted in the past or more. So that will be some decisions that you will want to make. So looking ahead, when you're thinking about public art, when we're going through these pilot processes together, you'll be thinking about things like maintenance and staff and lighting and landscaping costs. What are the realities of what it is to invest in a public art program and then to keep it going? All of the communities that we have talked to have some type of annual amount that they put into general upkeep of the public art they've been invested in because they want to keep it nice and they want people to keep coming and seeing it. But again, it's a reality. Do we want to expand the program after we finish the pilots? How are we going to feel about that? We'll be doing some surveying, but you will also obviously be making some pretty big decisions about that. And then how to fund it. We have talked about it from the very beginning. There are communities that have a % for public art program that essentially says any major public, project would have a percentage guaranteed to go into a public art piece, incorporating it into our capital projects as we're budgeting every year. You could just have a line item every year that's just part of public art, and that's something that we use every year, and during our justification meetings, we come in and talk to you about what we're gonna do. And then matches, because when we have state and federal grants, there is an anticipated match every time. So those are things that would impact future budgets. That's where we are right now. We've had a meeting with our committee. We came together for the first time, and it was a great meeting. I think everybody's excited to get started. I think our attendance tonight is a good sign that they are ready to get started. So our next step immediately is to get our master plan RFP out there so we can start working on the sculpture garden concept, and then we'll see once we hear about the grant in November.
Great.
Any questions?
You've done quite a bit of work here so far. And
We want to
it's,
get it right.
Pretty impressive, exactly. That's, the success is always in the early stages and good planning. I agree with that. Well, not really. You know what I mean. Questions or comments? Ms. Smith?
I understand the value of paying for the submissions from some finalists. Would those be scale models or a completed work? And then because we've paid for it, would we have the option of actually placing all 3 pieces at different places, or how would that work?
Yeah, a little bit, that's the details of how we write that process, but we could. Usually a maquette is to scale. It's not huge, but the concepts for the mural, I would guess, are going to be conceptual and digital.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, something like that.
But because we have paid for it, it would preclude them from entering it in the other
Yes.
competitions?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, our legal department will be part of that process, so they can help us with that. But yes, I would imagine if we pay for it, they will not be submitting it to someone else.
Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. First of all, thanks to Ms. Wisman and the working group, as well as everybody who spoke, especially, I hope I get these right, Richa and Shloka. Shloka. Thank you both being younger members of the community, being involved and engaged in the process and coming and speaking about your passion with it tonight. A couple questions on it. First, when you were looking at peer communities, it was highlighted that in other communities, typically they've begun with philanthropic gifts that have kind of been a catalyst. I assume that's not something that is part of our conversation here in Normal.
It's not what we're talking about right now, in part because most of those programs started 30 years ago when that type of a relationship was a little different. We're using a lot of philanthropy for other projects right now, so it would be a lot to go after multiple projects, at least through our department.
Sure. On the mural, and can everybody hear me? Okay, I know we've been having. You never know what with technology, but hence why I'm closer to the mic tonight. So one of the things that I love when you talked about the mural is the local apprentice stipend. I think that creating that opportunity is a really important piece to this because it keeps it local. It keeps it, kind of cyclical in a way that you're helping somebody else develop their skills to be able to go on and be successful. Maybe, making murals for other communities.
Yeah, or
down
more,
the line.
or, I mean, this won't be the last project we do, so maybe a next mural opportunity they could do because they've had that experience.
Yeah,
They're
I
thinking
love
along
that
the game.
component to this a lot. And as such, is there thought or is there opportunity to try and do the same with the sculpture garden piece as well, as you are putting together the RFQ, that trying to tie something like that in with whoever ends up getting getting the contract as the sculptor to be able to help somebody else new in that field as well.
Well, the difference in those two projects is we wrote a federal grant for the underpass, so we have a little more flexibility in the dollars to do that. It also, I think, would help us get the grant if we were able to do it. For the sculpture, we certainly could. It would be just more money spent differently. But we're still working on that budget. But if that's something that you would like to see always as part of a project, we can take that direction.
I don't even know how many people in our community are aspiring sculptors. That
More
would
than you'd
want-
think.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. But it's something that I was glad to see in there on the mural and didn't know if that was applicable to the sculpture
Yeah.
too. So anyway,
I like that
thanks
idea.
for thanks for your guys' work. Guys. Thank you.
Ms. Loren?
Okay, so a reminder, and maybe Ms. Reese can help with this. On the original underpass connector project, we did set aside some dollars for some level of public art, did we not? At least through some lighting, or am I remembering that incorrectly?
No, I think that's accurate.
Okay.
I'm looking back, no, not. Mr.
For lighting.
Otto's
Yeah.
gonna have,
Was-
there was,
was it more
there's,
lighting
yeah, lighting.
package?
Lighting in consideration of public art.
Okay, that's what I'm recalling.
Right.
So,
So we, yeah.
okay, so we have that as kind of a base, and then these efforts take us to another level.
Right.
Okay, all right. Would you be incorporating presumably some of that lighting, those lighting amenities
Well,
into?
the lighting that's currently in the underpass design
Mhm.
was selected because it washes down the wall, which
Okay.
will highlight
Okay.
the mural.
Okay,
So
you're
that's the
planning
beginning
those.
of that.
Okay, good, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Mr. McCarthy?
There we go. Thanks, Mayor. I just want to start off in saying thank you to the committee that's been involved in the process for your time already. Again, great to see young students back involved with the town of Normal and continue to stay engaged. Keep doing that as much as we possibly can. And I guess just the meta thought of this, putting together such an engaged group of citizens to help us start to think through this and translate this general concept of public art into something actionable that translates into going out after federal grant dollars is a strength of the town, and Ms. Wisman, clearly you're continuing in that tradition of trying to translate some ideas and citizen engagement into going after bringing citizen dollars back to our community. So as part of the funding part of the government, we appreciate that. But also, mostly these are comments. My colleagues have answered questions about student engagement already, so I'm really excited to see that you've considered the 360 degree of this opportunity of student actual work engagement and apprentice and learning opportunity. So I'd echo those comments as well whenever we can do that. I think that's a marvelous opportunity, probably not common in college campus opportunities. But also, I greatly appreciated the benchmarking that you're going out to other, not only peer communities, but communities that are having good reputations for art and trying to lessons learned. We also have a good history of that. We may not invent the wheel, but we can sure copy it or steal the plans as best we can. And I think that that's really, really important. And as a small business owner and somebody who does works for hire, I can appreciate that we're taking a very professional approach to this about attracting good quality talent and consideration for paying them for their work that they do, whether they're selected as a finalist or not. They put a lot of time and energy into that, and I think it's important that we're acknowledging that, and I just wanted to say that publicly. And the other one was covered. That's it. Thanks very much. I appreciate the update.
Ms. Harris?
Thank you, Mayor. I hope everyone can hear me. Okay. First of all, I want to thank all those who spoke in public comment this evening and showing your enthusiasm for this public art initiative, and especially to our youth who are engaged. And thank you, Beth, for the work that you and your staff have also done to put this all together. I do have one question, and I may have missed it, so I tried to check a few times. I do see the timetable for if the grant is approved for the mural. And it sounds like, my understanding, if I'm hearing correctly, we're kind of going to go through this pilot process. So what is the expected timetable for both the sculpture pilot as well as the mural pilot if we don't get the grant?
Well, the grant's only for the mural, so we would
Right.
immediately start working on the sculpture garden. So that master plan will take a couple of months probably to complete. And then you would see that, we'd share that with you guys so you could see exactly what we're working with in this body of people who would do that request for qualifications. And I mean, it wouldn't be that long. We could set up a couple of months to receive submissions. And we could start planning on, depending on what the master plan looks like, it will take time for Parks and Recreation and seasonal needs to be able to adjust the site, but we could still be doing our research on our artists and going through the process of picking out who we're interested in seeing more work from and who are we interested in leasing. And so that work is realistic between now and the spring to be complete. Whether the actual site is complete, that's a totally different story. So that Doug Damry and I would have to give you an update later on what that timetable looks like once we have a master plan in place. But that will give us the idea. The timetable for the mural, with or without the grant, I assume we probably want to see some artwork there. So that will be a budget decision you guys will probably discuss on whether we can put money in the budget with or without. Because essentially, I came from it as, okay, to get the match, we have to put this much in to get the match. If we don't get the grant, we can do a project with the amount we would have originally budgeted for the match. It would just be half as big. So instead of both walls, it'd be one wall, which is better than nothing, right? So the grant really enhances what we're able to do rather than completely covers everything. So that would begin, we would again find out in November. So come November, if we don't get the grant, we would still go through that same process of seeking requests for qualifications and then going through the selection process. And because they would be working off-site with the polytab material, they would start in summer of '24 with the idea of being ready by spring of '25 to have the mural on And in that time between summer of '24 and spring of '25, we would do many of those workshops like I talked about, where the artists would be coming and conducting something with students and or the public, the general public, working with our partners, the McLean County Arts Center and the Art Station, that kind of stuff. So that would still be happening regardless, according to my thoughts. But again, it really comes down to where you guys want to be. And once we know more about the grant, I'm assuming Ms. Reese will talk to you all about how you want to give us direction to move forward.
Thank you.
Further comments or questions? Thanks, Beth, for bringing this. It was very informative, and I think a good direction we're going on that. I'll never not talk about how robust the art community is here in McLean County, and another effort to showcase that. And take a moment to say this will be our second major art project, and the first being this building. I think 80-some pieces of art, all done by McLean County artists, some of which are in the room tonight, showcasing the incredible talent and dedication to the arts that we have in our community. So
That was
thank
a
you all for
specific
being here.
question they asked about in the grant. Can you give an example of your community investing in public art? So it was great to have that immediately at my fingertips to be able to answer that.
Great. Thank you.
you.
We will be back at 7 o'clock for our council meeting. Call to order a meeting for the Normal Town Council for Monday, August 21st, 2023. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus?
Here?
Mrs. Lorenz?
Here.
Ms. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Byers?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Preston?
Here.
Mr. McCarthy?
Here.
We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. We have no public comment tonight. We'll move to the omnibus agenda items that will be taken with one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. Ms. Smith?
D as in dog.
Ms. Lorenz?
E is an echo.
Motion for approval, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to acknowledge I would like to be excused from any bills that I have incurred.
Move approval.
Second.
Items under the omnibus tonight are approval of the minutes of the public hearing of August 7th, 2023, and approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of August 7th, 2023. Report to Stephen filed town and normal expenditures for payment as of August 16th, 2023, and a resolution to accept a proposal from George Gildner Incorporated for the replacement of floor drains in the water distribution building at 700 East Pine at a total cost of $61,822 and approve an associated budget adjustment. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, those items are approved. Item D is a resolution authorizing an engineering services agreement with Farnsworth Group Incorporated in the amount of $129,803 for supplemental design services for West College Avenue from Rivian Motorway to White Oak Road. Ms. Smith?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
Yes, in reading over this, I had initially some questions. For example, it references a 50% of the budget, and it didn't match the 129,000, but digging further, I saw where the 50,000 was referred to, but I also saw an indication where one of the subcontractors had a negative amount, and later on in the paperwork, it did document that particular subcontractor was no longer in business. But because of the complexity of this, I would just ask if it's possible to walk through all the moving parts that are part of this agreement.
Well, in all reality, I probably won't walk through all the moving parts of this agreement because it is a 40-page council packet report with attachments. So there's a lot happening in this particular agenda item. But in a nutshell, what we are trying to do is reflect a modification to our agreement with the Farnsworth Group. Farnsworth Group has been under contract with the town of Normal for the West College Avenue project, the West College Avenue Improvement Project. What we're asking council to approve tonight, though, is a modification of almost $130,000 to their contract, which reflects a number of things. It reflects additional scope of services for some work that required some redesign in response to Rivian's site plan and their new parking lot for their employees, additional turn signals and turn lanes, or traffic signals and turn lanes and things that were required to accommodate the growth of Rivian and their plan for a new parking lot. And that is that additional design work of the roadway is reflected in these scope of services. It also reflects some modifications, as you referenced, Ms. Smith, of a negative dollar amount. It reflects some change of allocation in subcontractors with Farnsworth on this project. And then it also then ultimately meets all the obligations for the paperwork that's required because this project is partially funded with IDOT. So all of these 40 pages put together reflect all the things that have to do in terms of administering the changes and the management and the oversight of the agreement with Farnsworth, their subcontractors, the design details, and then complying with IDOT requirements.
So is this a formal change order, or is it a change of the scope because of the Rivian traffic?
It's not a change order, but it would be a change of scope, an addition to the original contract with Rivian, reflecting all these things.
And if the town had not caught the information about the one business no longer participating and proceeded with the original paperwork, would we have been out of compliance with any of our funding?
We could have been out of compliance, or we could have spent a whole lot of time on the back end trying to, I guess, rectify paperwork and documentation. So this reflects where we've come to date and where we want to end up and how we need to make sure we're in compliance with everything that IDOT required.
Well, I want to commend the town for catching that in the process to remain in compliance, so there's no interruption of the funding and the work on the project. So thank you very much, and kudos to the engineering department for staying on top of it.
Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, that resolution is approved. Item E is a resolution approving a settlement agreement concerning temporary parking lots at 612 Kingsley Street and 603 Dale Street.
So moved, please.
Thank you. Mrs. Lorenz?
Thank you. Gotta be fast around here. Okay, so this is an unusual situation, I think. And I just want to do a level set and before my question. This special use permit was issued in 2018 and for possible redevelopment, but plans never happened to redevelop. And so a special use permit was issued to allow this person, the property owner, to maintain it as a parking lot and also not pave it, which would be per our code. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and the special use was for the parking lot or the pavement or both?
The special use permit there are two parking lots involved. One is on Dale and one is on Kingsley. The special use permit allowed these two parking lots to be used as parking lots and remain gravel for no longer than 5 years.
Okay, what's the zoning of these? I probably should know that, but
You know, B1 general business.
I would have guessed. Okay. So then moving forward, this now has come up 5 years later, and this moved forward to the Zoning Board of Appeals for an extension. Is that correct?
Well, I believe they asked for either an extension or a new 5-year special use permit to be approved.
Okay, and that
And that request was
denied or
denied
recommended
or recommended for denial by the Zoning Board of Appeals.
because we don't do extensions, or?
Correct. We would expect parking lots to be paved at some point, and we have not intended for these types of special uses to continue on in
Okay.
5-year increments. And I did not attend the zoning board meeting, but I understand that was their position.
Okay, so it in fact was recommended for denial by staff. In fact, it was denied by the zoning board. And then subsequent to all of that action, then a settlement was reached? Is that how this happened?
Sure, yes. In the scope of next steps, the zoning board addressed this issue at their July meeting. And the next step then would be for these two special use applications to come to council for approval or denial. Zoning board would have recommended denial. In the interim, before bringing these two special use items to council, I had conversation with the developer who indicated that the school year was about to start. These parking lots are used by Illinois State University students and leased through the school year. And it was unlikely that they could be paved in the event that council were to deny the special use applications. It was unlikely that they could be paved by the end of September, which was the expiration of the special use. And we then had a conversation, the developer and I, regarding a settlement with the ultimate goal of getting the parking lots paved. And we thought that if we could hold off and pave them in the spring, then the town does ultimately meet its goal of getting parking lots paved. And the students or those who have leased the spaces for the school year, will not be inconvenienced through a paving process. So at the end of the school year then is when the work will take place.
Okay, and, and then if there's not compliance at that point, I did see where part of the settlement was to enforce the fine that could be enforced right now.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have to settle? Is there something legally requiring us to settle?
No, I don't think that's an
Okay.
obligation of council. I believe this is just an ask, because
Okay.
if council chooses to deny the recommended settlement agreement, then I would come back to you probably next meeting with the actual special use applications.
Okay.
And that would be an action item on September 5th then for council then to consider their original special use apps.
And then if that gets denied, what happens ultimately to this land?
Then they would be obligated to pave the parking lot by the end of September, which
Mhm.
would be the expiration of their special use. And if not, they would be subject to fine. Is that correct, Mr. Day?
Yes, if it weren't paved or returned to green space by the end of September, then they would be out of compliance with the code, and our typical property maintenance provisions would apply.
Okay.
Which would most likely include trying to reach some kind of settlement if we went to court or something for the ultimate compliance.
Settlement or court, did you say?
Yeah, it would be probably either a court fine or some fine imposed that went before the board. Typically with all property maintenance cases, we try to reach some settlement anyway.
I have some concern about this settlement, and I'll just put that out there. I'm not overly in favor of it. There's been a long runway on this. You've had 5 years, kind of at the 8th or 9th or 10th hour, coming to zoning board in July to suggest that backs are against the wall with the school year starting. We know the school year starts every year in August. So, I'm concerned about that, and I'm concerned that it would set a precedence that the next special use permit user might find it within their desire to ask for whatever the special exception is. So, on those factors, right now, I've got a lot of concerns about this, but I'll pause my thoughts there and let others weigh in if they'd like.
Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. Question for staff. Do we have other parcels, or are there other instances currently in the town that are that have temporary special use permits right now? Like how this had a 5-year window on it originally. Are there others that are currently somewhere within their 5 years at this point, or were these two the only two parcels that fell under this?
I believe these are the only two. I'm looking at Mr. Crummell, who's agreeing with me. So we have no other temporary special use permits that have been awarded.
Okay. I guess a question, I don't know if it's Ms. Reese for you or for legal, but so I understand the hardship, of course, of the property owner having to pave these now with students and with lots full of cars for ISU students, presumably. That makes sense. That's quite an inconvenience, especially when you put in landscape requirements and drainage and everything else. It creates an issue for sure for those living it every day. That said, it's been 5 years, and it hasn't been a surprise that sprung up yesterday. But my larger question, I guess, is is there any concern on the part of staff that if we approve this settlement, that would then be like, that would then open the door to other special use permit holders, not just temporary parking, but any special use, that they don't necessarily have to comply with the terms, and then can just, come to the town to settle after they are facing non-compliance?
I will start, and then I'll ask Mr. Day to supplement. I suppose that's always possible for a special use holder, someone who has an authorized special use, but I would say it's not probable in terms of being in a similar situation. Most special uses have different criteria. This is the only kind of special use we've dealt with in regarding paving parking lots. I'm certainly not gonna make any excuses. I don't know why it didn't get done for the next 5 years, or for the past 5 years, but I think in this particular instance, based on the situation we're in and the fact that we have a developer who is willing to execute an agreement and understands the penalties that will be applied, come July of next year, if it's not paved or returned to green space, I think we're in a pretty good shape from a public perspective. I guess I would just suggest that, staff brought this to your attention in hopes that we could, partner with the developer to get this done and get the outcome we were hoping for. And, we don't have, and I can't make excuses on why it hasn't happened now, but certainly didn't come to our attention until June when it was filed to be before the zoning board. So I understand certainly council's position and what you're saying in terms of the disappointment that it didn't get complete based on our original 5-year approval. But in this particular instance, what we're proposing is at least a written document where they agree to the risks and we'll, if this is approved, be patient for 10 more months. And Mr. Day, you,
Yeah, just a couple of quick points is, this is the only temporary special use that we've got in our code. So in terms of the expirations, we're not going to see the same situation happening other places. And then just to reiterate what I said earlier, if this goes into non-compliance, our typical procedure is to try to come up with some process for the property owner to come into compliance with the law. So we wouldn't be in a position, this special use or some other special use, where we found somebody in non-compliance, we just immediately start cranking in the $500 a day fine. We'd try to work with them and come to some kind of solution where they would bring the property into compliance. So even if there were some other type of special use, we would be looking at some kind of method for them to come into compliance as well. It wouldn't just be you get a settlement, you get a $500 a day fine.
Thanks.
Mr. McCarthy?
Thanks, Mayor. So if I understand you correctly, Mr. Day, the process would look a lot like what we're considering right now.
Yeah, any time a property is in non-compliance, we would look at it on a case-by-case basis and figure out the best route from point A to point B to bring it into compliance.
I appreciate that extra context. I was wondering about the legal ramifications. I guess this is fairly straightforward for me. We've got a business owner with a business interest, and we certainly don't want to negatively impact that, particularly because it involves ISU students and ISU, and we try to make sure that those interests, as well as all of our business owners, are well served. But also, we're going to end up what we're going to get, or what we want to get out of at the end of this within 10 months. And so, and particularly if we've come to an agreement that legal is happy about and not concerned about, that would be my biggest concern, but without any major concerns there. And a fairly stiff fine on the end, I think it's a reasonable middle ground to within 10 months get this resolved either way and not inconvenience any ISU students or ISU. Thanks.
Ms. Harris?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to belabor over this at all, but just for.
Ms. Harris, you're gonna have to get it. Thank you.
Sure, I'm sorry. I'm never the one who has to get close to the microphone. I have to get used to this tonight. Not to belabor over this, but just for my complete understanding of the full process. So you answered Councilmember McCarthy's question, which was, we would still be doing something similar. And if not, if I go back to your further statement, then the next thing would be us incurring legal costs for it to be possibly a legal litigation for a settlement, if you didn't come to some remediation, correct?
Yeah, I don't know costs for us, but typically when we get a property maintenance, it could be you're out of compliance with the code, it could be, you don't have a roof on your house, some kind of property maintenance issue, we would look at that and say, okay, what's the best way to remedy this situation? And then obviously it's gonna be a fact-by-fact analysis each time it comes up, depending on what kind of remedy is required. Occasionally we get the property owner that invites us to go pound sand and doesn't want to deal with us at all in settlement agreement, and that's when we have to start threatening the fines and potential court actions.
So let me go back through the process. Typically, let's say this was not on the omnibus agenda tonight. Typically, the town would immediately do remediation, not necessarily fining, right?
Right. Yeah, typically our first step, we write, ordinance violations based on the non-compliance of the property and kind of come to a settlement with that.
So you write the ordinance violation. Does the ordinance violation automatically result in a fine?
No, typically it goes
That's what you
through
said the first time. I
a
wanted to make
settlement
sure you bring back to
process.
that part.
We'll kind of come up with a settlement agreement. If they come up with something, we'll keep the case open, and then it gets dismissed if the property comes into compliance.
Okay. So basically, kind of very similar to what we have before us,
Yes, without
without it being necessarily.
the
a
extra
forfeit,
wrinkle in this is the whole special use process.
is
and
because
how
of the
that
special use.
affects things. But yeah, ultimately, it's pretty much the same approach we would look at if it were any other type of property maintenance issue.
I rest my case, Your Honor.
Ms. Smith?
Just to further request clarification, it's not simply a matter of paving it at this time because we do have green space requirements for parking. There would be a plan that would have to be developed that would incorporate what we require for paved surfaces that would have to go before the planning commission to be discussed and voted on and then come to us. So at August 21st, there's not a lot of time for this property owner who dragged his feet over 5 years to now get into compliance, but we have something before us that would provide more than adequate time to go through that process, and our settlement agreement clearly states it's $500 a day if it's not done at the end of the term of this extended agreement, correct?
That is correct in terms of it must be done by July 15th, 2024. And what must be done is either a code compliant parking lot, which means paved, landscaping, stormwater solutions. So it does require design work. And so it either has to be that, a code compliant parking lot, or they can return it to green space.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lawrence?
Okay, I'll take another swipe at the apple here. I did notice that at least one of the lots is for sale, is it not?
I believe I noticed a for sale sign in or near one of the parking lots, yeah.
Okay. And is the fact that there is this special use permit on the property, is that impeding the saleability and attractiveness of this lot or lot?
I
No.
don't, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I don't think that the special use is going to affect any potential sale. The settlement agreement itself says that this is going to be binding on any future owners. We've
it
got it so it can be
transfers.
recorded with the recorder of deeds, so any future owner is going to see that this is an encumbrance on the property.
And one of the lots is primarily used for overflow restaurant parking, and the other one is used for apartment. So probably the impact is that one of our concern for students is really on that one that's for the apartments. How many lots are on that, spaces are on that lot? I'm just trying to get an understanding of the impact on students. Is it 50, is it 25, is it 100,
I think the number was 70, wasn't it?
70? Right. And one last question, because with all the clarification, now I'm more confused. This is for Mr. Day. If we were to not do the settlement and September happens, is there still a $500 fee that's enforced at that point?
Well, we would go through, so under our code, we've got a broad range of fees. It's $25 to $500 a day.
So
500
we
is the
have
maximum.
some fining mechanism that would trigger? Okay. And so I'm just going to ask this question maybe more rhetorically than anything else, because I think you all know that I think this is not a good settlement. After 5 years, and this developer knew that the end of this was coming, and that if they fell into a noncompliance, they would get an ordinance violation that would have some level of fining per day to it. And they had 5 years to know about that. Why do we think he's going to make a change in a year? Same fines, just one more year. It seems, I feel taken advantage of. So
And
I'll
I
leave it at that.
apologize for that. I guess the only thing I can say, and it may be helpful or not, is moving forward, if we allow the special use to expire and the settlement agreement is not approved, there is risk to the town in terms of what we will actually get for fines and receive. We may impose fines, but ultimately these sorts of situations tend to end up in court and trying to settle.
And we won't end up in court in a year anyway?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think the chances are less if we have a signed agreement of what the fine amount would be applied, but Mr. Day?
Yeah, I don't think we'd have the same procedure that we'd have under this agreement that we have just under a normal property maintenance agreement. Also, I think there's less chance of noncompliance, not to throw up a huge defense, but these are fairly rare special uses, and I think there could have been some confusion as to whether or not there could have been extensions granted under the code. There's not a huge history where you could look. Right. So I think there's more clarification now that this is a clear deadline that must be met without extensions or the fine's going to apply.
That's all I have.
My 2 cents on it, I would say, should the developer have done this paved that project? Yes, and did not do it. But is his request unreasonable? Not to me, for 10 months. And what I find to be the issue for me is the imposition and inconvenience is going to cause up to 70-some students on where they're going to park their vehicles for the next semester. We've dealt with this developer in the past. I trust him at his word, so I'm very comfortable doing an extension on that. Further, please call the roll.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
No.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved. We have one item of general orders tonight, an ordinance amending the Town of Normal zoning code, section 15.20, having to do with adult use cannabis facilities.
So
Move
moved.
approval. Second.
discussion on this item? Oh, Ms. Loren.
I don't have to be the first to go, though, but does anybody else? Maybe not. Okay, I'll jump right in. Let me find my notes. Well, I mean, I like where I'm going with this right away, but I would like to make a motion to amend the ordinance to include a cap of 4 recreational cannabis outlets in the town of Normal. Currently, the revised language does not include a cap.
Before we
Can I
accept that, I'm
do
looking
that?
to Mr.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering
Mr.
if I
Day.
can do
Is
that
that
so quickly.
an overreach on what we're considering tonight?
Yeah, I think that the approach would be if you want the cap, that would have to go back to the planning commission for another public hearing, because that wasn't part of the subject matter or agenda that they held a hearing on, because that wasn't part of what was given to them.
So we don't have any ability to amend this tonight? Is that what you're saying?
Not beyond the scope of what went to the what the planning commission held the public hearing on.
So, Mr. Day, would it be accurate, though, if that's the route that council decided to take, to, what would be the step? To vote no on this and then initiate or remand it back to planning commission? What steps would have to take place?
So if the amendment for the cap of 4 were to pass, it would be probably just an amendment to send it back to the planning commission. I don't know that we'd have to vote no on the specific ordinance, it would just be
So correct me, the amendment should read to have a cap of 4 units and remand us back to the planning commission?
yes, well, yeah, it would be to amend it,
Right. Well, I
to
can
send
do
it
that
back
at
to the
least.
planning commission for the consideration of a cap of 4.
This is not a bad start, and that's how I feel. It's a start. I think we've made strides in crafting this revised policy, but I don't believe that it adequately represents what we've heard to be a diverse range of concerns from all of our residents. We've heard in this chamber the impassioned voices of people who are for this. And we've heard equally impassioned and deeply concerned voices about those who are very concerned about the entry of this industry at all. And I am speaking up or attempting to speak up and trying to convince the group here tonight that we need to take a stronger, more comprehensive approach towards compromise to try to reach and represent all those voices. No one voice is right, one set of voices are right, and the other is wrong. I think they both have merit. And that's why we need to really work harder at a more comprehensive compromise. And if that means sending it back to the planning commission, let's get it right. The 1,500-foot buffer is definitely a great change, step in the right direction. A 200-foot setback around certain specific land uses, sure. But I assert that without this cap, here's the risk we run. I don't know if anybody really, maybe it has sunk in at you, but I'll say it anyway. We run the risk of potentially 6, maybe mathematically as many as 8 of these outlets in our community, in Normal alone. Why do I say that? Because we know we have a couple more hundred, the state has a couple more hundred, about 200 more licenses to issue, yes? And we know that we've been told that we get about 1 in 50 assigned to us. So do the math, that's 4. We have 3 approved. We have 1, I think, in the outer verse somewhere that's at least been assigned to our community and looking for land. There's 4, mathematically another 4. Now, with the strides we've made with this revised language, I don't know that we'll be able to stuff all 4 in. I think there's still a decent amount of space along the northeast northeast corridor around Veterans Parkway. And then there's another fairly decent swath of land on the west side. Now, all the stars are gonna have to align. There's gonna have to be a willing buyer, a willing seller, and land for the right price. So I realize a lot of things have to come together, but, okay, so if we've got 3, 4 right now in the hopper that we know of, and maybe another 2, one that goes on Veterans Parkway and another one that could fit into somewhere West College, there's 6, maybe a 7th. Maybe the stars all align and we get all 8. And you couple that with the 2, and we know that Bloomington has capped it at 2, you got 10 for Bloomington Normal. For a footprint of our community that takes about 20 minutes to get from the furthest edge of Normal, North Normal, to a southern reach of Bloomington, that seems pretty dense to me. And so I think it also seems pretty dense for those who are concerned about the proliferation of this kind of business. I think we are opening ourselves up, or continuing to allow ourselves, not opening ourselves up, but continuing to allow ourselves for more packed chamber and planning commissions and conversations like we've seen up to this point for people seeking more compromise on this issue. And if we don't take that step towards a cap, I think we are allowing ourselves just to allow this conversation and this consternation to fester. I'm going to go on a little bit longer if I may, since this may be my only shot. I've talked with staff, I've talked with council members individually. We've had public conversation here. I'm going to provide some counter arguments to some arguments that I know many of you hold, and the reason that you will probably vote for this tonight. You stand on the let's be pro-business. I'm pro-business. I love local business. But this defies the assignment of these retail outlets for recreational cannabis, defies normal free market capitalism. They are assigned to us. This is not Trader Joe's looking at a community and saying, ooh, yeah, it's got the right market component and makeup for us to be successful. This is not Southwest Airlines deciding whether or not Central Illinois Regional Airport would be a great place to put some flights. No, this is assigned to us. And I think it's essential that we acknowledge that. Each of us acknowledge that in our decision-making. My second argument is one that I've heard, and my counter to it is 2 wrongs don't make a right. And it's in the comparison of how we should handle this, because it's the same way we should handle alcohol and gambling. You know, and to pull back the lens a little bit and allow me to speak about society for a minute, I'm not sure that alcohol and gambling ordinances in any town USA is a best practice and a gold standard to live up to when you consider the social ills that they have brought to our society, for better or for worse. I don't have to enumerate them. Abuse, addiction, tearing down families. I mean, and then a group, you know, a body like this is very concerned about the public safety. So, you know, when I hear well, you know, we do this for alcohol and video gaming, and I just want to say, and how's that working out for us? Yep. Those other industries are more mature in their establishment, for better or for worse. They've been accepted as some social norms. Recreational cannabis may get there. I don't think it's there yet, as we've seen from the divisive comments from the various voices. But right now, at this moment in time, I think it needs to stand on its own and be evaluated on its own and not be compared to, well, we do it for alcohol and gambling. So however we could maybe move forward with enhancing this, albeit improved language. And I'll be honest, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one. I think the 1,500-foot buffer and the increase to 200 setback is certainly a step in the right direction. Whether or not that my motion passes tonight or not, I will continue to find opportunities to enhance the current ordinance, because I don't think it is fully representative of the entire community and the range of voices that we have heard.
I'm going to ask you, Ms. Lorenz, are you referring to an amendment? Or are you just, I'm not clear here.
I am
Because we
re-
did not have a second on an amendment, and the amendment really wasn't clearly defined.
That is my pitch. If someone wants to second my motion, if it even can be allowed.
Well, it's an amendment, not a motion.
And I offer that amendment, and I ask for a second. I would like to move that we make an amendment to introduce a cap of 4 recreational cannabis outlets, and for the process to take its due course back through Planning Commission.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion on the amendment. Ms. Smith?
At the previous council meeting, I requested that Mr. Yoon identify what revenues were included in the sales tax line item. And he clarified that it's not just retail sales, but it's gas tax sales, and it is sales on cannabis. Our gas tax revenue have gone up since the Quick Trip on Vernon Avenue reopened, and with the addition of Love's on the north side. So there, and if you looked at the change in our revenues in the time period when those things occurred, it was a pretty substantial contribution that just those 2 entities made. I would argue that the cannabis sales are also contributing significantly to the fact that we are enjoying surpluses. And I don't necessarily agree with vice taxes that unduly place the burden on people, whether it's cigarettes or alcohol or cannabis, but it certainly relieves a household who doesn't partake of those particular lifestyle choices. I'm a fan of reading the panographs 100 years ago, 50 years ago, and I can't help but notice that 100 years ago, this community was wrestling with how to enforce prohibition after decades when what had been a recreational drink was now outlawed. And it's kind of, I would almost say, amusing to see some of the way citizens were trying to work around what was then the law of the land. And then coincidentally, 50 years ago, the ripple effect of Normal now allowing liquor sales. I would argue that we are going through some normal growing pains to recognize that this is a legal substance that some people use the way others would use their alcohol or cigarettes. And I would also point out that even with the expanded 1,500 feet footprint, because marijuana is still illegal on the federal level, just because something is zoned B1, there still may be complications to a business actually getting a cannabis dispensary in that location. So I would push back against the idea that we could see as many as 8 businesses here in Normal. So I am not in favor of putting this control on this. Fiscally, it makes sense for us to have these revenues coming to us and allow us to have a community that can provide what our citizens expect in terms of ordinary fire, police, roads, et cetera, but also quality of life services like public art. Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy.
Thanks, I think, Mayor. I guess clearly my colleague is very passionate about this, and I don't want to wade at all into the moral side of this conversation or the notion of legislating morality. I'll let that for other people who have that drive to litigate that. But I do want to echo something my colleague just said as a couple of reminders in this conversation. As one is it's illegal in the state of Illinois. That ship has sailed. It's here. And so, however anybody feels, pro or con, that's not for us to take up. Certainly here, I echo the excuse me, the concerns or the comment that 8 is highly unlikely, and that they're for the area. Yes, Bloomington's limited. I do want to say a couple of things. Is liquor licenses are also issued by government bodies. Cannabis aren't the only ones, and there's nowhere near the restrictions that are placed on cannabis on alcohol. And so liquor licenses, there aren't the limits, there aren't the proximity quite as much as cannabis. There are some certainly, and we've seen the parity in some of the language that we're trying to do, but they're certainly not limited like this. They're not 1,500 feet between liquor license owners. They're not required the level of security that cannabis locations are. There are distinctly different and much more stringent rules. And I just want to remind the public of that we're talking about one of the most regulated recreational substances that we currently have on our books. Also, that the public input has been fairly even here. Talking with a few of my colleagues I know from my side, I've heard pretty equally here. And that this proposal actually represents a compromise already. Compromise was used, but that this proposal is a compromise because we did have a public work session on this and we did change the rules. We did reconsider some spacing, and so that is a compromise. This is the compromise. And I also just, to make sure that we can make decisions and move forward as a body, that this proposal also does represent the majority of this body's opinion, and that we don't continue to try to relitigate, all due respect, but that we don't continue to try to relitigate decisions of the majority will of this body. I don't think it serves our community well, and understand we all have passions. There's decisions that we've made that I haven't necessarily agreed with, but I hope we can make a decision and get on to the job of governing with the consequences of that and not find ourselves back here again and again. Thank you.
Further discussion? Ms. Lorenz?
I am not trying to legislate morality. I want to make that abundantly clear. I don't think that you can legislate, human behavior, reality. Probably ask our police force that, right? They see that every day. So I want to make that abundantly clear. What I am advocating for is, let me just say, I am not going down the path of relitigating anything. We will take the vote tonight, and we will move on. At a future opportunity, if it arises, like this body has done in the past, about 5 or 6 years ago, when we redid and relooked at our gaming ordinances, video gaming ordinances, we took an opportunity to tighten that down. So that's what I am referring to when I say I will continue to advocate, just as that council member continued to advocate for video gaming revisions. What I am doing is trying to represent more fully and asking my colleagues here to consider representing all voices on something that I don't think is totally settled. You're right, it has been fairly even. And, you know, the public work session that we had was about 30 minutes, 15 of which was a very educational recap by our staff, and 15 minutes spent where I think I spoke for a lot of it. And then we had some two-on-ones. We as a group have not had robust conversation on this. I am trying to bring that about. If not tonight, perhaps at a future date. One last thing I'll say, if I haven't convinced you at this point, which I probably haven't, putting a cap will make life a lot easier for staff. It takes a lot of the consternation about zones and rezoning and measuring and so forth out of the equation. We hit that cap, it's very clear. If you want to do a favor for staff, you might want to think about it. Thank you.
Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. While I think that the outcome of this amendment vote is probably well determined by now, I do think that it's worth me chiming in with some validity of Ms. Lorenz's comments and some concerns I've heard similar as we all have here in the council chambers in past meetings talking about specific dispensaries. And I think that her concerns are certainly more than valid and represent a large contingent in the town. And, you know, I've been consistent on wanting a cap, and so I look forward to voting yes for the amendment, but then moving on with the issue after that amendment is done and the issue's done.
Further on the amendment? Call the roll on the amendment, not the overarching ordinance. Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith? Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
No.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
No.
Mr. Byers?
No.
Mayor Kus?
No. The amendment fails. We'll go back to the original motion. Is there further discussion on that? Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. That item is approved. We have a motion under new business, a motion to adjourn to executive session.
Move approval?
Second.
Please call the. Yes. A motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss issues of land acquisition, issues of pending or probable litigation, and issues of personnel.
And those particular items are, do we need to quote the code?
We don't need the actual section. And just for clarification, it's only pending litigation, not probable litigation.
Thank you. I was trying to cover all the bases. Since I think we have three things we can go to executive session for, and we're going for all three tonight. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, we are adjourned to executive session. Thank you. Going to executive session. I'm from New Jersey.